So yeah, so this was an interesting case. Before I get into the timeline, when I was researching this, Joe, I had a really hard time finding accurate information on timelines and dates for this case. So I started researching, and obviously there's lots of news articles, and I was going to a lot of our usual suspects for, I would say, there's websites out there that aren't what you'd say news sites, but they are pretty reputable when it comes to reporting missing persons. And I
Yeah, we
kept,
like check up on what they report, and it's
yeah.
usually pretty. Or they say, and they usually put the sources too. So we'll go check out the sources and things like that.
So I was coming across several of those sites that all had the same bad information about this case. And I started thinking to myself that they must have gotten this from like some source document that was wrong. And I dug into it more. And we don't talk about this guy or his work very often on the show, but David Politis and the Missing 411 books, he had originally covered this case in one of his books in 2015. And then he actually had a documentary out on Amazon with this case in it. And pretty much all of the dates in his book on this case and in his documentary were completely wrong. He had events in his
You're calling out Mr. Politis right now.
on this case.
You've done your homework.
I've literally looked up statements from law enforcement on this case that contradict what he stated in his documentary and his episode.
Okay, good, because like
Yeah,
his full-time job is this.
Well, I mean,
it's time to come after us if we're wrong.
I find his work interesting, but this
we
case,
love his work.
I don't know how they ended up getting these dates so wrong. I don't know what happened, but it was kind of funny how a lot of people must have used his book and documentary.
That's probably it, because he seems like a good person to go to for source documentation.
Yeah,
because it's his full-time gig.
Yeah, exactly. So, it is what it is. But just if you go looking for information on this case out in the internet, be mindful that you're going to find a lot of, uh, you know, articles on it that are just wrong. And I had to go to news reports and then actually look up what law enforcement actually said about the case to get the correct dates. So it was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So this all started in September of 2014. So Aaron Hedges and his friends Greg Leitner and Joe DePoo started I would say not a week long, but like a 6-day hunting trip on September 5th of 2014 in the crazy mountains of Montana. So they planned to start at the Cottonwood Creek trailhead. That trail would go all the way up to Cottonwood Lake. And they were actually going to set up base camp at a lake closer, which was Campfire Lake. Now, I don't have the exact distances. So what I did was I went into Google Maps and I plotted the locations that were mentioned in this case and tried to do kind of like a point to point distance. So it's not an accurate trail distance. So, it's a distance you'd say like as the crow flies. It's like one of those distances. So the point to point distance from the trailhead to Campfire Lake was roughly 3.92 miles. So Aaron, like Joe was saying, was carrying a bow and arrows, and he had also a handgun. And his friends were armed with rifles. So they were going out for a multi-day hiking excursion. Sounds kind of fun, or a hunting excursion. The group had 2 horses and a mule. But for some reason, Aaron decided to walk in. So at some point between September 5th and September 7th, I was not able to determine the exact date or time this happened, but something spooked their mule, and it started bucking, and it started throwing their supplies off in their kit, and apparently Aaron's sleeping bag was in it. And now I don't really understand why they weren't able to recover the gear unless they were in some kind of environment where it went off the side of a cliff or something.
Okay.
So I don't understand why
there was no explanation as to
not that I could find.
Couldn't get their gear.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, the timeline for this case was so messed up in the research I did from the various sources. I couldn't figure out what happened to the gear, but it was gone. So Aaron decided to so let me back up here a bit. The group had previously hunted nearby here at a place called Sunlight Lake, and this was just north of Campfire Lake. And they'd actually left a supply cache there for emergencies in case someone needed to go, and stay the night there or whatever. So Aaron decides to split off from the group and head to Sunlight Lake, which again, point to point was about 2.8 miles. And like I said, it could be slightly longer or shorter, the actual trail distance. I didn't have the exact distances, so I apologize for that.
How dare you?
I know, right? So fast forward to September 7th now, this is between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. So this is a Sunday. This would be the last communication and last time they would see Aaron. So, like I said, Aaron decided to head towards Sunlight Lake and try to replace his lost sleeping bag. So he separated from the group. His friends would see him leave around 7 a.m. that morning. The Sweetgrass County Sheriff's Lieutenant Alan Ronenberg said the original plan was that he was going to go up to that cache to get a sleeping bag and some other stuff and then come back. He radioed them that he had missed the turnoff, and they told him he needed to come back up the trail and come back to camp. This would be the last time they actually spoke to him.
So they got him on the walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
He said he knew he missed the trail.
Yep.
So he was going to go back to hit. I'm guessing it was kind of like a fork that he just walked past.
Yeah, it sounds like so. In my research, there were conflicting reports that they had GPS Garmin walkie-talkies that actually showed GPS coordinates of each walkie-talkie.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't actually verify this with any of the law enforcement communications.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's true or not, but several of these articles stated that on the GPS device, they noticed that he was just on the edge of the screen and he had wandered northeast of Sunlight Lake. So I actually created a Google map of the different points. So if you go to,
I can't screen share without completely restarting my computer.
Yeah, let's not do that.
So I'm not going to mess it up now, but now we know for next time we'll be ready.
Just
I'll be able to actually pull the stuff up.
Just go to Google Maps and while I'm talking, and you can pull up the Crazy Mountains area and then look up these different spots. And you'll see that Sunlight Lake is just north. What I say, I think it's north just 2.8 miles, point to point. So not a big hike by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, 2.8 miles, you should be able to do that and head back, same day. Like, get your stuff, come back. So, Aaron had planned to return to the camp where his friends were staying that evening.
So their camp was on Sunlight Lake.
No. The supply cache was on Sunlight Lake.
Cache.
Yeah,
I thought you were saying case at first. No, cache.
No. So yeah, the cache was on Sunlight Lake.
Okay.
So I'm just checking our live feed. Sorry. We already had a comment, Joe.
All right.
Nick D says the terrain is real steep. Hiking to the base camp, there was no chance in recovery of lost gear. So,
all right,
that's great.
We're gonna have to take Nick D's word for it. So this is gonna be a new thing. We can't verify this stuff, but we're just gonna trust him. We'll assume he's from the area for right now.
I kind of assumed if the mule, threw the guy's gear, that it must have been unrecoverable. Because why would you? I mean, if it just went off the trail.
A good way to think about it. Remember when we were in Glacier and I busted my knee up and we were hiking out and we had those guys come by with their mule and they had their horses.
Yeah.
And we were along that switchback. If any of those mule lost gear, I agree with Nick, that would have been gone. In that area we were at, it was so narrow, we'd like hug the wall so they could get by.
Yeah.
So that would have totally been the thing. If they bucked some gear, it'd have been gone, and you don't want to risk climbing down a sheer face to try and recover it.
Yeah. So he planned to return that evening. I said the conflicting report about the walkie-talkies. This is from September 10th of 2014. A sergeant who interviewed the two hunters, so these are his two friends, noted that they spent most of the next day, Tuesday the 9th, traveling with the animals. So they had gotten some kills to the original camp at the head of the Trespass Creek near near to and on the other side of the pass to Campfire Lake. They spent the night there and then spent the day, Wednesday the 10th, traveling to the trailhead at Cottonwood. So fast forward to September 10th of 2014, and that is when they were coming out. And it was also when a major snowstorm hit the area, according to other reports that I had seen. And this, so again, like I was saying, a lot of the reports I had seen said the snowstorm, and including Politis's case, said the snowstorm hit the day that Aaron went missing, which is completely inaccurate because I have a note from the Park County corporal, one of the law enforcement officers involved in the case. He wrote, I assumed incident command at 700 hours on Thursday, September 11th, 2014, due to a significant weather event which brought 1 to 2 feet of snow and very cold temperatures the previous evening. Neither horse team was able to complete their search assignment. So whatever is said out on the internet about the storm happening earlier during the day he went missing is totally inaccurate. It happened several days after he was already last seen by his friends. So,
okay.
But this snowstorm is a major complication for searchers. So some of our other cases we've had recently, that it was pristine after they went missing. 2 feet of snow really makes it hard to search. like that's not easy to search in.
No.
So it's September 10th, 2014. Like I said, at some point before the 10th, his friends came to the realization that Aaron was missing when he failed to return to camp. There were reports that his friends spent a lot of time searching for him. But like I just said, that interview from law enforcement, they didn't spend any time searching for him. They continued hunting, and then they dragged their kills out on the 10th, the day that he was actually reported to law enforcement. So there were also conflicting news reports about when Aaron was reported missing. An article from the Great Falls Tribune states that his friends rode out on horseback on the 10th and reported him missing to authorities. However, the Mountain Pioneer reports similar facts, but they state his friends first contacted Aaron's wife, Christine Hedges, who then reports him missing to the Sweetgrass County Sheriff's Office. And then I did further research and actually found the communications from the Sheriff's Office. So they said at approximately 6:23 p.m. on September 10th, Miss Hedges called dispatch and reported Aaron missing.
All right, so that's verified.
Verified.
That part of the timeline is completely verified.
From the Sheriff's Department, yeah. So the Park County Sheriff, Scott Hamilton, goes on to say, it was my understanding that she had received a call from one or both of the guys who were with her husband. She's the one who contacted Sweetgrass County, and they are the ones who referred it to us. Corporal Greg Todd, who heads up the Park County Search and Rescue, said, the duration between the time Hedges went missing and the authorities being notified did raise some eyebrows, especially among amateur sleuths on social media who made instant, unabashed accusations of foul play. Even Ronenberg, who we mentioned earlier, an experienced bow hunter, did concede that the time lapse might seem peculiar. So
peculiar?
Yeah, peculiar. I can't. I'm so nervous about doing this on the live stream. So
they think the guys he was with was potentially responsible for his disappearance?
Well, you know how the internet is and Twitter and
no, how's the internet? I thought it was all people that care about each other.
Twitter is a lovely,
and
friendly
they just
place.
get along, and everybody's just so peaceful and happy and shares useful information.
So a lot of speculation like he went missing. They last saw him at 7 a.m. on the 7th, and he's not reported missing until the night of the 10th by his wife. Like his two friends don't even make the call. You can kind of see why people might start to assume foul play right away.
Well, okay,
but I'll go into.
Okay, I'll hold.
So
keep going.
I'll go into this. Law enforcement eventually ruled out his friends as suspects in the case, and his two friends also said, the reason why we weren't able to get this reported sooner was because the remoteness of the area and the lack of cellular coverage. I would argue that if you're concerned your friend is missing, you call your hunt off and you either go look for him or you immediately head in to report him missing.
Yeah.
If you went missing on the 7th, I wouldn't keep hunting the 8th and 9th and then come out the 10th like, oh yeah, by the way, Joe's missing.
And did they say they knew he was missing? And this is where I want to play devil's advocate. I don't want to try and lead anything, because I'm thinking, if I'm with a group of guys, and what's weird is, I'm not saying it's correct, but I feel like I would treat the trip a little bit differently if we were hunting rather than camping, even though it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Just because I've gone on hunts with people where you eventually do split up.
Yep.
So if I knew you had gear, you just go into the cache, you have survival gear, you know what you're doing, you're familiar with the area, and we've got our walkie-talkies. You know what? Never mind. Because he said he missed the turn back, and he did tell them he was trying to come back.
He was already turned around.
He said he was turned around, and he said he was on his way back. So I changed I was going to say, like, maybe they would have thought, oh, maybe he's saw an animal and was like hunting it.
Yeah.
So then they're like, hey, he's got GPS, he's got a walkie-talkie, he's got a gun, he's got a bow, he's got gear. Like, I would kind of consider that fine.
You remember in West Virginia when you like disappeared out of our site for like 20 minutes, and we started walking around looking for you, because it's unusual for, like, we looked 360 degree.
How ironic would that be?
Yeah, right. And I was thinking, we were talking, we're like, all right, if he doesn't show back up in an hour, we're gonna tell someone that our friend's missing. Yeah. It's unusual for you to just disappear.
Yeah, and I thought you guys went back down the trail. So I went down the trailhead to the car, and then I went all the way to the car, saw you weren't back, and I came back and then found you. And
then I think we got a text through eventually.
Oh yeah.
But
and that was a small park. That was like nothing. That was like a 20-minute.
So if this were me and we're out in a very remote part of Montana, and you had already radioed us that you got turned around, I would probably be like, all right, let's just call the hunt off. I would probably go up the trail looking for you. And if I didn't, I'd probably go to the supplies where they wait there for a night. And if you didn't show up, I'd hike straight out and notify the authorities. That's what I would do.
So either Nick D, who's watching, is either like an expert on this case, or he's just very convincing. He's saying they hunted the area in the past, so it didn't ring the alarm immediately.
No, that's true, because they had that supply, those supplies at Sunlight.
And that's kind of what I was alluding to that before I even read that. Like, hey, maybe this is like, I think, like, again, like if we went to a local area around here that I had hunted previously before and kind of knew it real well, and and everyone I was with knew the area, maybe I wouldn't freak out so much if you just didn't show up when you say you were gonna.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I said, hindsight's 2020. We are, armchair quarterbacking this entire story. So I don't want to like immediately say like, oh, that was suspicious, they didn't say he was missing right away.
Yeah.
But okay, go on. We don't have to. Well, let's go through the story.
Boy, that's squeaky.
I'm gonna spray something on it. Here, you keep going. I'm gonna switch chairs.
Okay, switch chairs. So, like I said, he was reported missing by his wife the evening of the 10th, and this is again a quote from Park County Sheriff Scott Hamilton. He said, "By the time we were notified and were able to spin up, the weather had hit. So we're dealing with 2 feet of snow in the mountains. The continuing storm made air searching difficult for the first day or two." And then he goes, actually impossible. So this goes back to, Joe, what we always say, like the first 24 to 48 hours in a missing persons case in the wilderness are incredibly vital.
And that's without giant snowstorms.
That's without major weather events. Yeah. So just the fact that they, weren't able to report this case sooner. Now he could have still been alive by the 10th. And if he was, that snowstorm probably was what did him in.
If you have gear and even if there's a snowstorm, if you got a good tent and you got your sleeping bag and enough food, you could hunker down and, use the snow to insulate potentially. That's if you have a tent.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if he didn't have one.
So a full-blown search and rescue effort kicked off on the 10th of September in 2014. So search crews entered from the Park County side, focusing their efforts on the area that stretches from Cottonwood Lake Trail to Trespass Creek, which we said was near Campfire Lake. According to authorities, the hunters had begun their trip at the Cottonwood Lake trailhead, like I said earlier. Corporal Greg Todd is quoted here saying, "We got 2 feet of snow and it was snowing hard. We actually deployed a horse team based on what we had initially. They made it in as far as they could, maybe even further than they should have, and then they came back out. It was snowing hard. The temperatures dropped 35 degrees. It was tough, very cold, very wet. probably in the teens, if I remember right. The horse team got back well after dark, but we didn't search in the darkness in the snow because that's not safe. The horse team was our initial response, he added, but we had dog teams and foot teams the next day. So, according to law enforcement sources, the search would eventually include 20 dog teams, 7 horse teams, 59 ground searchers, a technical high elevation team, a National Guard helicopter, and private helicopters, all equipped with night vision equipment and spotlights. So they had a lot of people in the field for this search, and they mobilized, as quickly as they could based on the when he was reported missing and the weather. So,
and if you go on Google Earth, like I said, I can't share right now, but you can see the Cottonwood Creek Trail very, very well from satellite. So there's some cover and some foliage, but you can really make out the trail very easily along the creek.
Yeah. So,
looks like a beautiful area.
No, it does look cool. So the like I said, the SAR mission, they searched an extensive area, in the crazy mountains east of Willsale. Hamilton says they also attempted to ping Hedges' cell phone without success. And then here's an interview they did on the 12th with his friends. So during an interview on September 12th, the two friends explained that they thought Hedges was probably deceased. The sergeant asked them why they felt this way, and they answered that Aaron was not in his right state of mind. And the sergeant notes that the two friends did not feel he had the skills to survive in the area in inclement weather. So conflicting information there, because a lot of people stated that he was an experienced outdoorsman. He's a bow hunter, but now his friends are stating that they don't even think he's alive on the 12th. That's not even a week after he went missing.
That's giving me a little red flags, but I'm not going to bring up any theories just yet.
Yeah. And, so now they're bringing up the possibility that he was not in his right state of mind. Does that mean suicidal? Does that mean he purposely went missing to, start a new life? We don't know. So a corporal had talked to the two friends on September 11th, and he told them this. So this is another weird part of this story. So it's like I said, a corporal talked to the friends on September 11th, and he told them to stay out of the search area and the instructions that they decided to ignore. So his two friends ignored the search officials, and they went back to Sunlight Trailhead, where they had talked to a deputy and a second corporal. The two friends told the deputy and the second corporal that they were going to Sunlight Lake, where they had an old supply cache, and the deputy tried to discourage them from going because he did not want them to complicate the search effort. And the deputy also said that the weather was still pretty bad. So his friends ignored the advice by the law enforcement officials and headed up to Sunlight Lake, and they spent the night there and didn't find him, didn't see him. And then they returned to, back to the SAR people and said they didn't see him. But I just find that kind of weird. I don't know if that seems weird to you, Joe, but why on the 12th would you go back in there and, like Sunlight Lake is like the epicenter of where the search is. Like,
yeah,
I mean, if he's around Sunlight Lake, they're going to find him.
Yeah.
If he's alive. So I don't know, that seemed weird to me.
His friends are all of a sudden just acting squirrely in general.
Yeah.
Like not listening to the officials, not listening to people who are arguably the experts in that area.
Yeah.
If you're a search and rescue in Montana, I'm sure you're pretty seasoned.
Yeah.
It has some legitimate backcountry.
So fast forward now to September 17th, and there's a big break in the case. So, several days into this search, they actually find several belongings of Aaron's. So boots were found east of Sunlight Lake, close to the creek and falls. They were set intentionally side by side. Close by was a Camelback water bladder, and just off the trail was a fire pit with a partially burnt cigarette pack, a fire bundle, 2 waist belts from a backpack that had been cut off. Were also located, but despite an extensive search, nothing else was found. The tube connecting to the bladder had been removed, causing searchers to believe that Aaron had tried to drink water. Puzzlingly, though, the searchers were in the same spot a day or two before and didn't come across the items. So when I went on the Google Earth, this general location was about 1.1 miles east, 1.1 miles west of Sunlight Lake. So it's odd that searchers had searched that area the day before and didn't find anything, and then all of a sudden this gear was found. I mean, they could have missed it.
I wonder, like, with how much the snow cover. 2 feet of snow is a lot of snow.
Yeah.
Like, is the snow melted a little bit? Like you said, did they just miss it the first time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then this is the official communication from law enforcement, because there was, like I said, this whole case is riddled with inaccuracies on the internet. So, a Park County corporal notes, at approximately 1300 hours, SAR Command was advised the teams had located several items of interest near the campsite. Due to recent snowstorms in the area, it was not possible to determine the age of the fires. Also found in the area were a blue rubber Camelback brand water bladder partially filled with liquid, an MSR water purifier pump, several small pieces of a cigarette carton with edges burned. One of the pieces had the word Spirit on it, and a pair of Wolverine brand camouflage Gore-Tex hunting boots, size 10. And they later determined that this gear was, in fact, Aaron's. So that part of me, that leads me to think that he might have been alive when the snowstorm hit. And
try to get a fire going or something, like, maybe
and then
realized that
hypothermia kicked in, and he started, paradoxical undressing and started taking items of clothing off, like his boots. But what happens next makes it even more strange. So,
okay.
So fast forward now to September 22nd, 2014. Despite finding those items, the search is scaled back. So until they receive more information. So it just shows you that these searches can't go on forever. Even when they find stuff, at some point they have to scale it back. So, and they had a lot of manpower in the field for this search. I mean, that's 20 dog teams, a bunch of horse teams, helicopters, alpine, specialized alpine teams.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets weirder, Joe. And
that's why we do this.
Check up on the live stream. No new questions.
Nope.
So, all right, let's jump forward 1 year to June 19th, 2015, around 3 p.m. A butcher from this town of Powell named Roger, I'm going to butcher this one, Blasanowicz, finds items belonging to Aaron several miles away from the area that was extensively searched. About 2 or 3 miles from his daughter's and son-in-law's home, Roger found a bow, backpack, field gear, and a hunting license with Hedges' name on it. He made the find around 3 p.m. June 19th, about 30 to 40 miles north of Big Timber, Montana. So if you're looking at a map of this region, Big Timber is, I would say, a little bit southeast of the Crazy Mountains, and 30 to 40 miles north of Big Timber would put you in the general area of Rhine Lake.
Okay.
Which, when I did some measurements on Google, point to point, that's about 21 miles east of Sunlight Lake. So Aaron would have gone from his base camp to Sunlight Lake. Then he went about a mile west, ditched his boots, and then traveled all the way over to this new area where more of his gear was found, potentially during a massive snowstorm. We don't know what time, maybe he traveled to this location first and then back to Sunlight Lake.
And where was this? What was the name of the location where the farther one away?
So
was it by any, like?
No, they just said it was this guy named Roger found this gear about 30 to 40 miles north of Big Timber, Montana.
Okay. I'm using the.
So I generalized it around
kilometers.
Rhine Lake. So find Rhine Lake, which is northeast of Crazy Mountains.
Yeah, I'm going 40 miles right off of Big Timber.
So, like I said, point to point, I didn't calculate what it would be actually on a trail, but point to point, that's 21 miles from Sunlight Lake, roughly. That's a lot of distance to cover, potentially without boots on.
Yeah.
Like I said, we don't know the timeline at this point of which location he may have gone to first. Did he ditch his gear there and then hike all the way down to the Sunlight Lake area and then ditch his boots? But that wouldn't make sense based on where his remains were found, which I'll get into. So,
yeah, this is wild because there's not major cities in the area, but there's like these little towns kind of all over where this area should be.
Yeah.
This is weird. All right, keep going. Yeah, keep going.
Roger goes on to say, the first thing I thought was it was a bear and the hair stood on my back. He goes on to say, but that theory quickly disproven. So he gathered the gear up and thinking it was just lost. He goes on to say, if it was mine, I would want someone to pick it up. My conclusion was some out of town or out of state hunter got cold and tired and went home. When he returned to the house, he said jokingly to Charlie Rain if any hunters had gone missing recently, and Charlie just nodded and stared. So searchers were notified of this gear that was found, and the Sweetgrass County Sheriff's Office investigated the scene later that night, and a grid search was conducted the following day, but nothing else was found other than the gear that Roger picked up around 2 or 3 miles from the Rains' home. So it's just very weird. The location was several miles away and outside of where Hedges was permitted to hunt, and it was on private property. Some of the items found in the fall, but nowhere near where Roger found most of the equipment. So again, this is a rare case for us where we have multiple locations where gear from the same person is found.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else was discovered in 2015. So now we're going to fast forward to August 5th of 2016. On August 5th, 2016, near the Sweetgrass Ranch, some guests found a skull underneath a dead tree. Now, I did a little, some calculations, again, not actual trail distance, but kind of just a point to point.
Like as the crow flies?
As the crow flies. This is about 9.22 miles east of Sunlight Lake.
So that could easily be like 20 miles hiking because of switchback going back and forth.
Yeah, or it could be shorter. Well, no, it won't be shorter.
No, because
that would make sense.
You calculated the shortest distance possible.
Yeah. Hello. So at the end of the timeline, I'd give a real quick recap of all the distances I calculated. And it really doesn't make sense when you hear them all after each other. But so law enforcement was shown the skeletal remains of the skull and then began a systematic search of the area where they uncovered less than 80% of Hedges' skeleton, all within 50 to 70 yards. The majority of the remains were concentrated in a 20-yard area. The spread of the remains were not atypical, according to Undersheriff Alan Ronenberg. He goes on to say, you have to consider that he has the possibility, or he says, you have to consider that he has the possibly been there over a year. Within that year, you have weather events, predation, scavenging, everything from ants to bears. So that makes sense. He went on to say at the time, it's still an ongoing investigation. Are we going to be able to tell what the man died from? Probably not. He said there wasn't any bullet holes in the skull. There's nothing else that we can see. A forensic pathologist will look to see if there's any knife wounds on the bones or hatchet marks, but I'm guessing it's going to go down as one of those mysteries. So obviously they didn't notice any trauma on his remains when they, picked him up. So no broken bones or anything like that. So, and obviously they found less than 80% of his remains. So we don't know if they found like all of his leg bones or arm bones. So we don't know for sure that he didn't break something before he died.
That's to say, that's kind of a weird thing to make, like a statement to make when you don't have 100% of the remains.
Right.
Like it doesn't look like it was foul play. We're missing 20% of the body.
Yeah. And they don't say which, I couldn't find which parts of the remains were missing.
Yeah, but to me, that's like how you know that wasn't what did him in.
Yeah.
like the 20% that's missing might be a key factor in him going missing.
True. So, landowner Rebecca Rain described a location where the items were found as full of pine trees, broken down branches, and tall grass. She says it's pretty low where it was actually. It wasn't too far off Rain Road. We just would never have guessed it was that close. He could see the house. So he died in an area that was now I've got some theories.
I've got a couple theories. I'm waiting till you finish.
Yeah, so I'm almost done here, I promise. But it's interesting that he died near a road and within view of a house. But I'll leave it at that for now.